So, my name's Christian. I decided to write my term paper on persecution and discrimination against the Jews in the 1920s America. My thesis essentially is that the discrimination toward Jews came from white Protestant Americans, mostly out of fear and just xenophobia in general because of um, because they wanted to be 100% American, and the Jewish ideals kind of aren't part of that. So they feared the alien and like anomalous religion almost. It's not the same as theirs, so they don't understand it. Therefore, they kind of fear it. They also control them through immigration, and they spread a bunch of stereotypes just to rile up the Protestants, kind of like fear mongering propaganda. But then the way Jews kind of combat the discrimination was that they changed their values kind of to blend in more, to fit in more. Um, Even though it caused like a cultural divide within the community. Um, so what I wrote here was that because of the Red Scare in 1919, I believe, is a Bolshevik revolution over in Russia, was that the Jews came from the same place um, as them, and a lot of them didn't, you know, like practice. A lot of the countries over there in Southern and Eastern Europe didn't practice Protestantism. They were either Catholic or they practiced Judaism, and a lot of other groups had different viewpoints. For example, anarchists, they were into socialism or anarchy, and that really scares the American people. Um, so essentially, they tied in the Jews to the Bolshevik Revolution. They blame them for World War I and the Bolshevik Revolution because of all their ties to different international ties through banking and big business and whatnot. Um, and because of these, fears, they were pretty biased against the people. One example I put was just a an unfair conviction against a Jew named Leo Frank. He was accused of murdering his coworker Mary Fegan, and then he was arrested, and then a newspaper article kind of just slandered him to get people to go against him. They broke them out. They broke him out of prison, and then they ended up killing him through a public lynching. So it wasn't a proper execution. And then years and years later, they found out it was really just biased, um, because a lot of American people at this point disliked the Jews greatly. There were stereotypes that they were Christ killers, and that they like had a clannish attitude that if they band together too often, they're gonna cause an insurrection and get just topple American democracy in general. Um, so that's one big point, is just they're really biased. They didn't care if they killed a Jew or whatnot. It was just they were just scared that an insurrection was going to happen because they didn't share the same ideals, and what they wanted to do was also assimilate them. They didn't mind that immigrants were coming into America as long as they assimilated as a Protestant. They supported capitalism, and they supported democracy, uh, they like socialism is like out of the question. Um, Also, the immigration acts targeted Southern and Eastern Europeans, and that's where Jews mostly stayed at. I mean, you know, they stayed in like Spain at one point, but at this point they're like in Poland and Czechoslovakia and whatnot, um, or the Czech Republic, and then the Immigration Act, or the National Origins Act of 1924, it was completely biased against them, and not just that, but like they completely didn't allow Asian people into the country. They banned them completely. But the issue with the Immigration Act was that they they put in a quota that the amount of immigrants that come into the country um, equals 2% of the population. Um, Sorry, I'm like, yeah. So the quota is that they need to come in 2% of the population. So, for example, if there were 100 Jews living in the United States, only 2 Jews from Eastern or Southern Europe could come in at a time. So that is really disastrous. And but another, and that's really restricting, but another thing that they practically used to really limit the amount of immigrants to come into America was that they used the information from the 1890 census, not the 1910 census. So in the 1890 census, there were a lot less Jewish immigrants in America at the time than in 1910. So, for example, 1910, there's 1,000 immigrants, right? So only 20 are allowed to come into the country, right? Um, but in 1890, for example, there was only 100. So there was only 100. So only two could come in. So they used outdated information to limit the amount of people coming into the country. And then another thing, what they did was they kind of tried to like blend themselves in a little bit more into the country, um, but it caused a divide. So essentially, the older generation of Jews that moved in the late 18th century, um, at this point they kind of assimilated. They kind of went into American tendencies. They changed Judaism to Reform Judaism, which is just kind of like a more basic form of Judaism. It kind of just helped more the Jews blended into more accepted into American culture. But so then when the new Orthodox Jews come in, who really practice Judaism, they get upset because it's like, why did you change your ideals to prove these people like for these people to accept you? Are you really Jewish? That goes against all of our ideals. What are you doing? And then the older generation of Jews, they were scared of them because if they riled them up, they're gonna get caught in the mix too. You know, they're like really orthodox, so they're gonna get caught essentially. Um, so that's another issue what they had where like yeah they blended in, but it caused a divide in their kind of like identity. Um, where one's like, why aren't you like how you're supposed to be? And they're like, well, we want to fit in. why don't we just fit in? It's almost kind of like Marcus Garvey's Back to Africa movement, where he's like, you know, we don't want to integrate. We should just go back to Africa. We don't belong here. We should have our own home. And then the NAACP is like, no, we are still American. Doesn't matter if we're African American or not. It's like we are American. Um, and then I mean the reason why I pretty much did this paper was because um, I like talking about the topic. Um, I've always liked U.S. history. I've always liked this time because it's a time of change. Um, you know, you're going from old stock America to new stock. You're getting better labor laws. Women can vote now. Um, Technology is increasing, um, and like on the surface everything's changing, but like ideologies and the way we treat people is kind of regressive at this point. That's why I like to choose a subject and like how people can combat through this. Another point is my parents are immigrants as well, um, and but we're Portuguese immigrants though, and I've never really seen any like hatred towards Portuguese people at all. You know, and I think that's part of like from my research is that they kind of just blend in. They just don't stick out all that much. I mean, we practice Catholicism, but we don't like stick out at all. You know, like people think I look Mexican, uh, but I'm not. I'm technically considered white. So that's why I like to learn about this, why I research this topic. Plus, it's a topic I enjoy talking about. I wrote two papers about topic like this last semester. I'm going to write my 100W topic, 100W paper on a topic like this as well. It's just something that's like, I think, pretty intricate and you can delve deep into and talk about a lot of things that different groups put in to go against these ethnic groups. Catholics. It was prohibition, and they also brought in the KKK, but the KKK targeted everybody. Um, Asians. It was immigration, and everybody. It was immigration. African Americans. They just treated them worse. They had the worst neighborhoods, so they had to create their own community together. Um, Yeah, so this is why I want to talk about this. As far as the coronavirus goes, it hasn't really impacted me all that much. It probably impacted my mom more than it did for myself. Um, I'm just at home, you know, taking my time to do things. I have all day. I'm trying to keep busy, but for me, it's just I get a little bit worried because my mom works in healthcare, so she's in the hospital like all day. So it's like, even though she's wearing a mask and whatnot, it's just kind of scary for her to come home sometimes. Even my dad is working construction, even though he's not supposed to. And I'm home all day, so I'm scared that they'll bring it into the house. It's kind of hard to go to the grocery store sometimes because I just don't, it just doesn't feel right to like stock up on things. So try to go once a week. Um, yeah, it hasn't really affected me. I mean, it's kind of beneficial a little bit. It de-stresses from school. I don't have to commute. But yeah, I'm just helping around the house, cleaning for my mom, cooking for my parents because they work a long day. I'm home all day. Might as well cook, do chores.